Hi everyone, this is Stephen Downs. Welcome back to Ethics, Analytics, and the Duty of Care. Pushing our way through in the final sections of the final module. This is Module 8, Ethical Practices in Learning Analytics. And the video we're doing right now is called Culture and Ethics. It's a short introduction, a little bit of a hodgepodge video to introduce the third major section of the module, which is on culture. And in this section, I'll be talking about three major subject areas: culture itself, citizenship, and democracy. Now, to remind you kind of where we are, in this module, we're, as I said before, going down the staircase. We began with regulation, and we looked a lot at practices. Up at the higher end of the staircase, things are more formal, more institutional. It's where a lot of the talk happens in the field of ethics and analytics, especially. It's focused on the institutional approach. It's focused on wrongs. But ethics, to me, more naturally, is what happens down the staircase, focused more on the good. It's more personal, it's less formal, and so we're moving toward things like culture, and then something resembling ethical joy. I don't know if we'll call it that by the time we get there, but something resembling ethical joy at the end. So that's where we're at. As I said, this will be a short video just to introduce the subjects. It's like this because I wasn't sure what order I wanted to present the next three videos in. I could have started with democracy and then citizenship and then culture, which probably would have fit this staircase model a bit better, but it felt better to me to begin with culture, and then out of culture we evolve into our discussion of citizenship and ultimately our discussion of democracy. So I'm going to do it that way. But if you feel strongly, you can watch those three videos in the other order, and it won't matter to me. So where do we begin with culture and ethics? I'm going to go back to Max Weber, oddly enough. Now, Max Weber was well known as the person who characterized the Protestant work ethic as the dominant ethos behind capitalism. As he says, in capitalism, all that matters is the increased acquisition of wealth. And this is justified under the dictum, God helps those who help themselves. And so the relation here between this and ethics is what can be called emancipation from economic traditionalism. Now, in a document from Avedon, this is translated to mean something like moving away from what might be called a dual morality thesis. So the dual morality thesis is the idea that there's one morality for yourself and another morality for your treatment of outsiders. So the morality for yourself, or perhaps for your family, or your in-group, or maybe your tribe, whatever terminology you wish to use, you conduct yourself with your peers in one way, but it becomes a matter of high art to deceive or perhaps even to enslave members of the out group, whatever that out group may be. And so there isn't that strong requirement that you, for example, always be honest no matter what. So according to this document, the Avedon document, the reason for the economic success in Europe wasn't so much capitalism, although, again, ethics is a precondition for capitalism, but rather this idea that there was one single common set of people all across Europe who thought of themselves as all part of this wider enterprise. So you didn't have in-groups and out-groups in Europe. All of Europe was involved in this big practice of focusing on the increased acquisition of wealth. So you would be honest with a person from Britain, you would be honest with a person from France, you would be honest with a person from Turkey. Didn't matter where they were from. That's what the Avedon thing says. And they have a little chart there to putatively demonstrate the honesty of people in Western countries as compared to other countries. Now, all kinds of flaws in that argument. One clear flaw is that the Europeans very much had outsiders. People who lived in Europe but were outsiders in many cases, for example, Jews and Gypsies or the Roma people, would certainly talk about what it's like to be treated as an outsider. And the Europeans were very happy to enslave or colonize or in other ways mistreat or act unethically toward non-Europeans. That's famous. And it's not like Europe has some sort of monopoly on honesty, that chart notwithstanding, because I have felt, and I know that other people have felt, very safe and very secure in knowing that I would be treated honestly in cultures around the world. Japan particularly is renowned for its honesty, but I experienced similar treatment in Malaysia, for example, and in the Middle East. Even though I'm very much an outsider there, I was greeted with respect and honesty and courtesy. So, and that's kind of what the problem is to a large degree with ethics, is that we feel that we have it and other people don't. And that's sort of what's happening in capitalist ethics as well. We have this idea that ethics is a precondition of capitalism. And so we sort of equate ethics and capitalism. But, because ethics is necessary to capitalism, it does not follow that capitalism is necessary to ethics. And so we need to avoid the tendency, the pull to believing that there's a specific kind of cultural, ethical value somewhere in the world that is superior to the rest. I'm going to talk about the relationship between culture and ethics, but no culture has a monopoly on ethics. And the relationship between them is going to be quite different from the way it is presented here, in a sense, by Max Weber and certainly by Avedon. Things like specialization leading to skills and an increase in quality, all of these things may lead to greater productivity and greater wealth. Doesn't follow that greater wealth is ethical. Weber says, there's nothing wrong with that. The big problem with wealth isn't the acquisition of wealth, it's the misuse of wealth. And that may be. But it's arguable that there are problems with the acquisition of wealth too. And we'll explore some of that. So that's kind of a preliminary. Another part of a preliminary is this whole idea that culture and social practices kind of go hand in hand. And we could think of, for example, the way environmentalists develop their own set of cultural practices, their own set of norms, their own set of values. Same with wine merchants in Porto. And often this is created by pitting themselves against an opponent or an outside. The environmentalists against the people who want to cut down trees. The wine merchants in Porto against the British wine merchants who basically own the trade up to a certain point in time. Social practice theory attends to the integration of emotion, motivation, agency, and all of these things into something like a cultural historical activity theory. Now, an activity theory, and we've talked about this in other courses, is a systems kind of theory. And so we're thinking of cultures as systems, economies as systems. And when we're talking about systems, we're talking about things with clear intents, clear boundaries, and therefore tensions and conflicts between the system and something external to the system. And yeah, that's part of the study of culture and part of the study of social practice. And we see this come out from time to time. For example, in Julian Stodd, just the other day, wrote about dominant narratives in social change. The dominant narrative might be how we characterize a culture. I don't know if I want to go so far as to say that the two are the same. Clearly, they're not exactly the same, but still. With these dominant narratives, they're part of a system, they're part of a collection, a group of people, a culture of people, and you have these interactions, these conflicts, or these intersections between them, and that, he says, may be where change happens. But I think culture and change are based on more than just conflict, and I think that's an important realization that we're going to need to take forward with us. Because so much of what we talk about in ethics and in technology policy generally is about conflict. And change happens in lots of other ways. Change happens through growth, birth, and death. It happens through movement and inertia. Only some of it is caused by friction. Every time we build something, every time we make something, every time we design something, we're creating change. And the big question is, how are we doing this? And this is where the question of design and the question of architecture is going to come into our discussion. So there are different ways of thinking about design. I was greatly influenced by a guy called Dan Lockton, who for a number of years, I guess while he was studying for his PhD and then converting that into a book, wrote on something called Architectures of Control in Design. And a few examples here. We have the car that actually won't let you open the hood to try to repair the engine. We have the famous bench with the little armrest in the middle there so that homeless people can't sleep on it. We have the printer that only accepts printer ink from a certain manufacturer. And there are all kinds of examples of how architecture is used to control us. And we see the same sort of thing online with what are called dark patterns. Or to quote from Harry Brignall, a user interface that has been carefully crafted to trick users into doing things, such as buying overpriced insurance with their purchase or signing up for recurring bills. And I think that a big part of the question of the ethics of artificial intelligence and analytics comes to bear on questions of architectures of control and design. How the things that we build can be used to exercise power and influence in society. And that leads to a concept, and we'll return to this concept in a few videos from now, of design justice. which is an approach to design that is led by marginalized communities and that aims explicitly to challenge rather than reproduce structural inequalities. It would include things like right to repair. It would include things like an architecture that helped rather than hindered the homeless. It would include things like replaceable, brand name, low environmental impact replacements for things like printer ink. But we need to be careful not to linger on that point too. And we're going to hit that, and I want to remember now to remember then to go beyond design. And that's going to be important. Ton Zylstra writes he has a dislike for two things. The first concerns treating the philosophy of technology, information, and data ethics in general as a purely philosophical and scientific debate, which then has no immediate bearing on the things organizations and individuals do in practice. And then second, seeing ethics by design as a sufficient fix. We're going to talk about design. We're going to talk about, and we have talked about the design of AI systems and the design of data gathering systems and the like. But we need to talk about the rest as well. And that's a big part of the motivation for these 3 next videos as well. They're going to seem like they're less focused on artificial intelligence and analytics, and they are. And I'll keep it in the back of my mind as I talk to bring us back to those subjects and the relevance of this to those subjects. But we need to get beyond the narrow scope of thinking of design and even design justice and even justice when we're talking about this subject. I mean, it's ethics, right? It's not architecture. It's not software design. It's not engineering. It's something else. And that's what we need to capture in this 3rd step in our staircase on culture. So that's it for this short video to introduce these next 3 videos. And I'll see you, well, in my time, I'll see you in just a couple of minutes. In your time, I'll see you whenever you come back to the next video. I'm Stephen Downs.